Hello! I hope you're all doing well and staying safe out there. So with the whole world being on lockdown due to, well, you know what, people have been stuck at home over this year. While in lockdown, people have had various ways of passing time, whether it be things such as drawing, reading, playing video games, and watching movies and TV shows. I bring that last point up because over this last year, I've been checking out all sorts of films, animated films in particular. I've been looking around the web through past decades of all sorts of animated movies to watch, and I discovered something interesting when I was looking through the 1980s. In fact, there was something in particular about the year 1985 and what happened after that prompting me to make this video. So today I will be talking about why I think 1985 was important for dark and scary animation. And what better time to talk about scary things than in October? Now, before I talk about why 1985 was important, I feel the need to give a brief history on dark and scary things in animation before 1985. Let's go back to 1929. That year we got 3 of Walt Disney's silly symphonies: The Skeleton Dance, Mickey Mouse, The Haunted House, and Hell's Bells. Haha, no. I bring these films up because it was the first time we got a taste of creepy animation. Over the next years, we got all kinds of other short films that also revolved around creepy and dark themes. Then, in 1937, Walt Disney's first animated feature, Snow White, was released. A film that generally, well seen as heartwarming and sweet, also had some legit terror in it. Over the next years, we got all kinds of scary things in animated films, usually just one creepy scene. Of course, there were a few exceptions. But then something interesting happened in 1985. So, now we finally get to talk about 1985. Now, what made 1985 so special? Well, we got 2 animated films that had one thing in common. They were scary! But not just your typical single scary scene in the movie. I'm talking full movies that really pushed the boundaries of what scary animation could really do. These films being, if you might have guessed by the thumbnail, were The Black Cauldron and Vampire Hunter D. The Black Cauldron was loosely based off Lloyd Alexander's book series, The Chronicles of Prydain, and was Disney's first ever animated feature to be rated PG. While not Disney's first time being scary, it really focused on the dark imagery and featured the Horned King, one of the scariest Disney villains of all time. While it was a box office flop, in a twist of fate, it gained a cult following, myself included. Vampire Hunter D was an anime film based off the first novel by Hideki Katsuki that pushed the envelope on the terror factor for animation. Like seriously, that film really turned up the terror factor, with its creepy atmosphere, disturbing imagery, and of course, lots of over-the-top gore! Now that I've talked about 1985, it's time to talk about what happened to animation after 1985. First, I'll talk about Vampire Hunter D's effect on Japanese animation. When I was looking around through animated films of the 80s after 1985, I noticed more anime films had adopted a similar aesthetic from Vampire Hunter D. In 1987, we got Lily Cat and Wicked City. In 1988, we got the film Demon City Shinjuku. All these films had an atmosphere, disturbing imagery, and over-the-top gore. Could it be that Vampire Hunter D popularized this new kind of scary anime? Well, it's worth noting that both Wicked City and Demon City Shinjuku are also based off the works of Vampire Hunter D author Hideki Katsuki.
Coincidence? I think not!
Throughout the following decades, we got all kinds of horror anime movies. In the 1990s, we got Biohunter and Perfect Blue. In the 2000s, we got Blood, The Last Vampire, the sequel to Vampire Hunter D, Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust, and King of Thorn. In the 2010s, we got Gaio Tokyo Fish Attack and The Empire of Corpses. I noticed some slight differences from the anime from the 80s. For example, Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust had an atmosphere more akin to vampire movies like Bram Stoker's Dracula. But whether or not these anime took direct inspiration from Vampire Hunter D, there is no doubt that they certainly have taken elements that Vampire Hunter D popularized, and these movies wouldn't have gained a footing if it weren't for this anime. Now that I've talked about Vampire Hunter D's effect on Japanese animation, it's time to talk about the Black Cauldron's effect on Western animation. As mentioned before, the Black Cauldron was a box office flop, but later gained a cult following, and it did have an effect on animation. Its effect on animation was more subtle and not as sudden as Vampire Hunter D's effect on Japanese animation. While looking through Western animated movies after the Black Cauldron's release, I noticed there was a slow but steady increase of trends in Western animation, such as villains that focused more on being darker and more serious, like the Horned King, disturbingly over-the-top villain deaths, scary locations, and creepy atmospheres. But when it comes to films that took direct inspiration or influence from the Black Cauldron, those movies are a bit narrow. I looked everywhere throughout films of the 80s and 90s for animated movies to see if I could find a movie that was similar or had adopted similar aesthetics and tone. The closest things I found were films like Philadelphia, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, and of course, The Nightmare Before Christmas. But interestingly, in the mid-2000s through the early 2010s, I noticed that we got this surge in Western animated films that centered around scary or dark themes, most of which were aimed at kids, with a few aimed towards older audiences. Now, what started this trend? Well, it could be argued that it started back in the year 2005, the year we got The Corpse Bride, or in 1993 when The Nightmare Before Christmas was released. Or it could even be argued that it started back in 1985 when The Black Cauldron was released. Whatever film started this trend, it went on for a long time. So that's how 1985 made animation much more terrifying over the following years. What are some of your favorite scary animated movies? Please share with me in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. I have other videos planned for the rest of the year. One of them is a top 10 coming out this month. I make fan music videos you can find on my channel if you're interested in. I've also made a Halloween playlist. Links will be in the description down below. With that being said, take care.